Well, we've heard that telecommunications giant MTN has ended talks with Orascom over the potential purchase of its operating companies in North Africa. Frost & Sullivan ICT consultant Lindsey Mc Donald joins us on the line now to unpack what's unfolded and to take a look at the possible implications for MTN moving forward in terms of its growth strategy. Lindsey, thanks so much for joining us on the line this afternoon. Well, this now marks MTN's fourth failure to actually close an acquisition over the last 3 years, leaving many disappointed, but we have seen a lot of relief come to the surface as well. What have your overall impressions of what's transpired here been?
I think it's definitely been a mixed bag of reaction. I think the relief that we've seen is simply due to the fact that the type of political pressure and involvement that this deal involved was probably too much for a commercial entity to take on by itself. I think it's unfortunate, though, for the company that, as you say, it's another failed deal. I think that we're probably finding that the executive management team is probably under a little bit of pressure from shareholders at this stage to really find the next route of growth for the company.
Yep, just taking a look at management's ability, I mean, there are question marks around deal-making abilities. Is that a concern for MTN operating in what is a very competitive environment right now?
I think the answer to that question is yes and no, because quite frankly, I don't think that there is a lack of ability on the management team to conclude a deal. I think perhaps the luck of the draw has been against the team in that they've tried to take on situations that were very difficult to resolve. So with the Barty deal, the fact that dual listing wasn't allowed, and this case, the fact that they were facing a rather belligerent government. What I do think, though, is that we need to see some sort of perhaps better choice in offerings that they're going after, and these are sort of factors that perhaps they should have been aware of when they decided to talk to both of the acquisition targets.
Of course, in this instance, I mean, the big obstacle has been the Algerian government demanding that, that right of first refusal to buy Orascom's local unit. Do you foresee things getting trickier for MTN and its growth strategy moving forward as governments become more protective of their national prized assets, so to speak, and wanting to keep them just that, national assets?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful how far we take that theory. I think that certainly, MTN is definitely a landmark company in South Africa. It's done fantastically well, but I don't think that the government of South Africa or any other country to that effect would be too likely to step in if it went against commercial sense. I think in the Algerian case, it really came down to national pride, and the government doesn't seem to be too keen to have an Egyptian-run company doing very well in Algeria, and that came down to a football match. So certainly it's something that one would have thought completely unrelated.
Well, there's been this traditional approach by MTN of acquiring an entire group. But do you think now, to kind of facilitate its expansion plan moving forward, the company is going to need to start considering the purchase of telecom companies operating in a single market and taking that growth strategy step by step as opposed to just full force?
I think that's definitely going to, given that we've had a scenario now with the 3 or 4 failed deals, I think that's definitely something that they're going to have to take into account. There are still perhaps 1 or 2 targets in the African market with groups such as Tigo, where they might be able to acquire those companies, but then the question to be asked is whether or not those operations will actually complement their existing companies. So I think that at this stage we would expect, to have markets that are identified. And there's a couple of markets which MTN isn't in and could be doing very well in. So I would expect to see probably a mixture of the two, actually.
Well, we've seen in your report released this morning that, the group's executive management is sure to come under this increasing pressure to deliver new growth strategies and revenues moving forward. We've heard today that MTN has signed a 318 billion naira financing loan to actually finance its capacity expansion in Nigeria. So growth prospects there seem to be looking good because it's warranted such a big investment right now. What's your outlook for MTN in Nigeria specifically and the scope or the room it still has to grow in that territory?
Look, I think if you look at the growth in the Nigerian market, it was about 2 or 3 years ago that it overtook South Africa as the leading market in Africa. So, and yet there's still quite a low penetration rate there. So there's still a lot of room for growth in that market. And something that we saw in the last couple of years as well was that the operators simply were not able to keep up with the demand. So Nigeria as a whole has a legacy of being a rather poor quality market. So even if the company was just engaging in this investment just for its current level of demand on its network, there would still be a lot of room for growth, and there'd be a lot of room for improvement, because as soon as the quality improves,
Yeah.
you're going to lock more customers in. But that, and in conjunction with the fact that there's still a lot of people who haven't made use of cell phone services even to start with, I think there's huge potential there. So definitely the investment is warranted.
With all of that, we've got, you know, the competition arena really heating up, especially now with Bharti entering the fray via that $9 billion acquisition of African operations from Zain specifically. I mean, that making them now the world's number 5 wireless carrier by subscribers. What are you making of the competitive playing field and MTN's position specifically within it?
I think it's quite a difficult question to answer, in the sense that there are some countries that are quite different to others. And I mean, we've seen MTN do very well in some countries, and then another example would be Sudan, where it's had to go through a bit of operational change and learn a couple of tough lessons, and now it's moving forward. But I think if we look at it from an African perspective, I still think MTN really has its nose to the ground. It really knows what it's doing in these markets. So I think it has an advantage. It certainly has an advantage over Zain right now and Bharti, in the sense that there is a lot of uncertainty within the Bharti operation as to exactly how this deal is going to move forward from an operational perspective. So MTN would probably do well to capitalize on the lull period, if you will, for the next 3 to 6 months as they get their act together on the Bharti side.